when a new platform arises, how should a marketer think about it? How do you begin to devise a strategy for that new platform? How can you do it in a way that's not so risky, but still enables you to move quickly? Anyone on the panel want to tackle that one?
I want to differentiate between speed and response, right? My endeavor and GE's endeavor is to be a very responsive organization. Because speed by itself could just mean you're going at a very fast pace without accomplishing anything. You need to be a responsive organization. And the learning organization and the marketing organization partnered to create a course called FastWorks. And it's not just a course, it's actually an application of how you do your daily work. And FastWorks is all about learning from the startups in Silicon Valley and see how can I get to market faster than what I would normally do. And the way it works is that you say, all right, I'm going to try out something. The earlier model was plan, make, ship, and learn. Now it's a make. Throw it into the field, learn what works, what doesn't work, pivot if required, and then launch. So if we had a budget of, say, $300 million, you'll say, no, I'm not going to give you $300 million, I'm going to give you $30 million. Test out a prototype, see if it makes sense in the marketplace. If it does, fine, continue, add. If it doesn't, change. So that you don't necessarily spend the whole amount, you actually are able to gauge responses from the customers right away and learn from that and move forward. So marketing is driving that, and we are teaching people that, because if just marketing is doing that and the rest of the organization is not able to work the same way, you have the marketing folks ahead of everybody else and the culture hasn't caught up with it yet. So you need to make sure the entire culture thinks that way.
And so what's a reasonable expectation to have on the part of management when you begin one of these experiments? When do you feel like you have enough information to know whether something's working or not working?
You have to have proof points. And all managers want return on investment, right? And one great example we had was when we were looking at an ultrasound machine a few years ago. And the normal protocol would have been, here is a budget for you. You can think of coming up with the new ultrasound machine in 3 years' time. Here we said, no, you take a small portion of it, create a prototype, go to the various customers and see whether it works. And they went to the customers and the customer said, this sucks, I don't want it. So we said, no point in pursuing that. In another case, we said, all right, we're going to come up with a new turbine for energy generation. We went to folks in Russia, and the Russians said, listen, I'm not necessarily concerned about fuel efficiency, but if you give me these parameters, it'll be successful here. Now you do that there, but when you go to Calgary, they may have a different set of expectations. How do you customize it appropriately means that you need to try out small experiments to learn what the customers really want and then pivot as is required.
I do think it's really important that at the highest levels of the organization you try to get buy-in for that whatever those guardrails are going to be, where you're going to take the temperature every so often to make sure that you're kind of in and out in assessing whether or not this is working. And I've spent a tremendous amount of political capital in my career where we didn't have that buy-in at the very beginning, and I've had to put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making that work myself and influencing other areas of the organization that weren't necessarily under my direct oversight, because that corporate acceptance didn't necessarily exist at the top. So I think there's one aspect where you could end up being a change agent, and you're trying to push that through a little bit more laterally, and then there's the aspect of how do you influence the rest of the executive team, whomever that is in your case, for how to create that culture, which is again, I think, part of what you were talking about in the last panel.
Marc, we were chatting a little bit about ways in which an organization can be nimble by interacting with smaller, inherently more nimble organizations like a startup, for example. So what have you been doing at Unilever with startups?
Yeah, so one of the things when you want to adapt to a marketing that needs indeed to be more agile and more responsive, etc., is to bring much more the pioneering and entrepreneurship spirit internally, and recognizing that already exists and it's in the startup worlds, and that the startups are today reinventing marketing because they have basically nothing to lose because they have everything to lose. So they have basically to try and find niches, whether it's in ad tech, whether it's in analytics, etc. So about 2 years ago, I started to test the idea. Unilever has a strong culture of venturing. So we have a Unilever venture arm, which invests traditionally in more product ventures. But it's separate from the business, from the brands, from the marketers. So I tried to bring a few marketers to South by Southwest. And I hardly found any candidates. And so I thought, okay, we have a problem. So I did manage to send a few. And then I brought them to Cannes, where we traditionally bring 30, 35 of our global brand vice presidents. And I asked them to share their experience and how they saw the potential of startups, with the idea at that time of creating a platform which then we called Go Global, which was how to partner a brand with a startup and help take a product of a startup and scale it. So an app product, a marketing product, a marketing solution of a startup, and then scale it through the power of our brands. Initially, I wanted to do 4 or 5. We had to limit it to 7 because suddenly everybody said, oh, that's really cool. We want to do one of those. So we thought this is really interesting. At that time, the size of the prize was $100,000. So every brand to sign up, either to commit $100,000 to do a pilot, said this is really interesting. How do we scale it at the size of Unilever so that we can really create one portal, one platform where all our brands can interact with all the startups around projects that are strategic for the company. And so we created the Unilever Foundry. So if you go on the website, you'll see Unilever Foundry, you Google it. There is even a YouTube channel which shows some of the projects. And we've so far put out 55 briefs out there, which are more tweet-like, with a pitch to pilot within 6 weeks, $50,000. And what's amazing is that we've already helped 22 startups scale up some of their ideas with the power of our brands, invested several $1 million in those pilots, plus when it works, then we invest marketing dollar as well as potentially invest in the startups themselves. So and there is also a mentoring program that helps our marketers mentor the startup, but also learn along the way the entrepreneurial. So it's a double, a reverse mentoring too. So it's been an amazing program to actually bring that entrepreneurship and agility and pioneering spirit and move from the plan and perfect to the launch and learn mentality. Whereas otherwise we would have done a multi-page brief, brief several agencies, puts maybe $1 million to develop a project over the next 2 to 3 years, and in 6 weeks, $50,000, you test things like artificial intelligence on feature phone, or like beacon technology on ice cream cabinets, which are really interesting, and you learn a lot.
And is this something that you're going to continue to do going forward? Is there a timeline for how often you're going to try to create these new relationships with the smaller companies?
No, we really, so that's why I was at in San Francisco. There is every year a conference called Launch, which is about really startups launching, and we've launched the Unilever Foundry actually in Singapore, in Israel, in London, but it's a global platform. We use it both, as a global platform, but also as pop-up events where we do some hacks. We facilitate some hacks around particular problems, like how to increase through technology sustainable living behaviors. So we go to a conference, we assemble a group of startups around a brief, and we work on 2 days to try to come up with new solutions. We use it also to generate, to crowdsource ideas. So recognizing that more and more ideas can come from anywhere. So the ability to tap into the crowdsource approach to generate ideas. So no, we really are committed. And funnily enough, it's something which has really very easily taken in the organization. Now people really have engaged, and again, if you're interested, some of you, if you go to the YouTube channel, the Unilever Foundry, you have 5 or 6 different examples of brand briefs that have actually been executed, and we're trying on this to live the model. So we're trying to be transparent. So really to be very much, doing it in a very transparent way.
I would, if I could just add one perspective from Amazon's point of view on this. I think, we try very much to be completely decentralized through the whole organization. And one of the things that I hear pretty often when I'm in discussions with my colleagues is that we're the world's largest startup. And because of our cultural values and the way we try to innovate and invent, we have lots and lots and lots of decentralized teams, each of which own, and ownership is a big part of our leadership principles, each of the different business units and ventures that we get into. And as long as you are able to articulate yourself in writing well enough to express an idea that you want to go try, chances are, if it's an idea worth trying, we're going to invest in you to try it. And some of them are very small, and it could just be an optimization around the margins on something. But at the scale that our business operates on, sometimes that can be very meaningful, and sometimes they're very big. And I think the example of how AWS grew is one of those. And frankly, like Amazon discovered the AWS business because we had a bunch of decentralized teams, all of whom were busy trying to manage the bits and bytes of their infrastructure. And on the whole, when you had hundreds of them, it became a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting that was taking away from the value that we were trying to bring to our customers on Amazon.com. And so the AWS business was born from that.
So it's interesting, both Marc and Stephen, you described ways in which your organizations have tried to cultivate an entrepreneurial or innovative spirit, either through partnering with smaller companies and trying to learn from them and get a little bit of their can-do entrepreneurial spirit, or the sort of decentralized model that you just described at Amazon. Raghu, when we were talking before coming on stage, you raised the question of can you teach how to innovate? So we just heard two different models of ways to sort of structure a company to be innovative or learn from smaller companies. At GE, how do you think about teaching how to be innovative, teaching how to be nimble?
Yeah, can you teach people how to trust? Can you teach people courage? Can you teach people speed? I think those are very important questions. First of all, I actually worry about the word innovation. I think it's overused and it's not adequate. Given the pace of change we have, I would prefer to use the word disruptive. 20 years ago, we used to call it creativity. Then we now, after Clay Christensen, we said it's innovation. Innovation by itself is not enough because everybody's got an idea. Is it going to make enough of a dent to inflect a path is the question. That's what Steve Jobs did so successfully. So how do you be disruptive? Becomes the poser, not necessarily how you be innovative. Because disruption is the higher graduation of innovation. And increasingly, I think we're going to hear that term as an important. And I think there are two aspects to it. One is you need to identify the right kind of people who are willing to break some glass. You have to manage them. You can't allow them to roam free. But if they break glass, bend the rules, you have to find out people who are able to see the world differently and come to some calls. That's one. So who you select is very important. Then how you train them. How do you encourage experimentation? How do you make sure that people are willing to learn and fail? How do you make sure it's okay for you to think of variance not as an evil, but as an opportunity to improve? And those qualities you need to start infiltrating in people. So what we did was we take a bunch of our very senior leaders to actually Silicon Valley. We take them to spots where they can learn through observation, where they can learn through experiencing. Here's a different model. Here is something I can flex on and see whether that makes sense in my world. Because normally you're so programmed to think in a particular way. By putting them in a different context, we actually are in a position to give them a little different orientation to their lives. And when that happens, they're willing to experiment when they come back. So one of the ways we teach them, same thing we do with courage, right? We take them to Normandy, or for instance, on diversity, we're making them walk across the bridge in Selma. So that they see the world through different eyes. And providing those opportunities makes them zoom out of their paradigms and think about the world differently. And that allows them to be provocative in the next generation.
Do you see different trends across marketers compared with the other types of executives that you have go through these programs?
The marketers are natural born rebels. And I love them for that, because the fact that their ability to look at the future and see what is relevant in the context makes them rebels, right? Which means that they are bringing to the company the forefront of thinking of what will be. And if they have the nuances to make sure that the company understands that, they become important translators, important conveners, and they become the center of gravity for defining our future. And from that point of view, marketers are a very important part of the toolkit an organization needs to flourish and grow. So they are actually, in our world, growth leaders, not just marketing leaders.
Marc, what do you see as the challenge within Unilever to becoming even more agile? What do you see as the decelerator, I guess, the obstacle?
Well, one of the big change that we live in the world of marketing is the fact that a few years ago you could actually brief an ad agency to do a campaign. They had time to develop it. You bought the media, you put it on air, and you watched the movie. And now when you launch a campaign, we have about 14 to 15 different agencies that are involved on the launch of that campaign. From the data analytics to the social to the content to the so the reality we have to create a very different way of working. So when we launch large campaign like you saw Dove sketches, for instance, a couple of years ago, etc. That's probably the first time we experimented that. We create command centers where we work 24/7 with those 15 teams. So it can be almost as many people as in this room. 50 people, and you arrive and you wonder what everybody is doing. And in reality, when you have the morning and afternoon briefing times, everybody has something to say and to report, and everybody really adds a piece to the equation, and it enables the media agency to actually repurpose the way they're buying media on the social channels as well as on traditional media. It enables the content agencies to actually recut and recreate some customized content. On corporate brand launch, we did up to 40 different takes on an initial piece of content to customize it to how people responded in various cultures, in various countries, given it one in 5 different countries. So you're really able to learn and adapt on a real-time way.
What was coming in? What were those 50 people responding to?
What do you mean?
When they had something to report, what were they analyzing?
Because some of them were saying, for instance, where, you have the analytics guys who tell you, who is actually responding, how many people are watching, how many people are engaging, how many people are sharing. You had the agency guys who tell you, based on what they hear, what are the piece of content. You have the social agency guys who look at what's happening on Twitter, what's happening on Facebook, and so you really have multiple skill set, and all of this converges to take the various pieces of information, and it's really a real-time adaptive marketing.
So it sounds like, because my question to you was sort of what's holding you back. It seems like having these really big teams you see as something that makes the organization or makes a campaign more responsive, that it actually helps things move along more quickly so you have a more efficient
and you can't do it all the time, but we do it more. We have facilities that help do that as a pop-up facility when we create campaigns on certain brands. And I think it really changes the mindset. Also, we need to move from a mindset of creating, content and airing it to much more almost a publishing or a studio mentality, where we have we're constant on alert, and we need to have a very clear point of view of what the idea of the brands are and what the benefits of the brands are, but then be much more responsive than ever before.
So I'll ask one more question and then we'll take questions from you. And I hope to really hear from, this is supposed to be one of our more interactive sessions, so feel free to chime in for a little bit longer than you would normally. But Raghu, one thing that you mentioned when we were going back and forth over email, you asked whether the term marketing was relevant anymore. So for a conference on marketing, I have to ask you that in public.
Again, I think let's look at what has changed. And I'm not an expert in this subject, so I can say whatever I want and pretend as though I have no background. I don't have a background in marketing, but here is what is changing, right? You're moving from large campaign to small ads. You're moving from hard to reach to always available. You're moving from selling to connecting. So, which means that you are now really figuring out what is changing and how do you be active participant in change, ride the crest of the change so that you're relevant. In that context, the old paradigm of what a marketing organization does, analyze, figure out strategy, figure out how you come up with product solutions. That may not be current in terms of how you want to employ marketing. Strategy, for instance, is no longer a once in a year phenomena. It's constant. You're changing it constantly. Therefore, going through a process of figuring out what needs to be done for the next 5 years is no longer relevant, because you have to respond to what is changing today. Likewise, your products have to be agile and adaptive to what is appropriate. So I think the marketeer has to be the innovator, the disruptor. If you look at all the role models, Jeff Bezos, the Uber guy, Steve Jobs, they're all disruptors. And in an organization which is a large organization like GE, you need to have those disruptors. And I would say our marketing people have to have that skill set. And that's why I would say marketing is good, but not sufficient or adequate definition for the challenges of today.
Okay, so we'll go to you. Yes. A microphone, I think, is going to come to you. I'm sure we could hear you otherwise, but...
Yeah, sorry, just following up on that. Earlier, Raghu, you were saying that you could train anything. You believe that as a trainer. You even mentioned being able to train empathy. A few minutes ago, though, you said that marketers are natural-born rebels.
Yeah.
And what you were just describing now, when you described those disruptors, I don't think you were describing skill sets. I think you were describing innate qualities. Can you train marketers? Can you train innovators?
You need to spot them. I'll give you an example. I'm going to take a minute, okay? I think the trick is in spotting them and grooming them. You could find that person in engineering, that person in finance, I don't know, maybe less in finance, but certainly in engineering and some other places. The idea is, how do you spot them and build them with some of the other skills which are available, right? I think increasingly we got to look for those raw traits and mold them accordingly, right? And then train them, because you still need to build them. While they have that basic instincts, you need to add on to them, right? So for instance, that's why we have a program called Experience Commercial Leadership Program. And we are changing the mix to more internal people, because they bring in the domain. Then you provide a bridge by training them with commercial skills, product skills and whatnot, putting them with those who are more adventurous, more rebellious, so that they see the world differently. So what you're saying is, I'm taking a core set of skills and I'm taking the innate qualities they have and then polishing up them to be relevant marketers. Again, you don't naturally train Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos. The trick is in spotting them and grooming them appropriately, So I would use the word grooming as opposed to training.
I would say in some way everybody's a bit of a marketeer.
There you go. That's
right?
a good one too. Yes.
Marketeer. You know, you're always kind of selling what it is that you're trying to accomplish and your goals and your vision for whatever it is your job function is. I mean, I see this happening in the engineering culture all the time where, you know, a bright engineer has a good idea and, you know, it's going to sink or swim with their ability to articulate that and to get people to buy into that idea. So, you know, the same is true for selling, product development, and many of the other aspects of business that I've been involved in. So I think maybe that's one of the ways that you, like, you know, are able to identify people who are able to sort of express their ideas in a way that resonates with people. But I think there might be something in there in terms of is marketing still a relevant function versus is everybody a marketer?
But I would also posit that you saying that everybody's a little bit of a marketeer is spoken as someone who comes from a strongly engineering culture. It doesn't always do the marketing thing.
Right. And in a solutions-oriented world, everybody has to be a bit of a marketer. In a product-oriented world, you can be a bit of an engineer, more engineer than marketer. But in a solution-oriented world, where the customer says, all right, tell me the switch and I'm going to press the button, you need to have the ability to reframe the equation.
Yes.
So I love having Amazon that's built on test and learn. GE, I was on the phone with Brant. I was on the phone with Brant Cooper earlier this week. I believe he's one of your partners on your program. And great hearing about the Foundry, one of our social enterprises, Unilever scaling in South Africa. So we've talked a lot about data, and our organization has spent 4 years identifying the most innovative social enterprises globally. We've looked at about 1,000 multiple award winners and picked about 36 that literally we've compared with all the other ways in which that problem's being solved and said, yeah, they can actually make that claim. I've never had any one of those organizations say their insight came out of data. There's one place their insight always comes out of, and if you want to be a data advocate, you can call it close data instead of big data. They're all on the ground, and I mean literally digging in the ground to plant the seeds and see how far apart they need to be and what the depth is. It's close data. It's actually on the ground solving the problem. It's not big, it's close. And all of them do that. And the ones that are most successful are natural-born design thinkers, not data scientists. So all 36 of them are close data people, and 2/3 of them are natural design thinkers, and none of them are big data people. So how does that tie back to the programs you're running, like the Foundry, like the FAST, so on, like the way Amazon grows its business? Because to me, it's a completely different set of recommendations than what might have come out of some of the previous sessions.
I would maybe say two things about that. One is we, before we get into something, try very hard to understand the metrics by which we're going to evaluate whatever that experiment or whatever that business venture is. And so we have a good sense for what data is relevant to what it is that we're trying to accomplish and then how we're going to evaluate that. And oftentimes you have to be pretty adaptive with that. It might not be the same thing that you should look at 6 months from now where you might have been wrong in the beginning. And I think just being open-minded is important. I will say that the concept of data science and looking at a bunch of information to glean insight from it to make better product and marketing decisions is definitely not new, and it's been around for a long time. What's happened is that technology has come so far that it is very easy to collect and store and manipulate large sets of data, which I think has given growth to this proliferation of sort of the data science profession and people looking at it. But there's still a lot of signal to noise there, and there's still a lot of brain power that needs to go in it. It's just that the tools are making it easier for people to evaluate.
Anyone else want to dive in? We have a question over here, yes. And please don't forget to tell us who you are.
Yes,
Thanks.
Sarah Humphrey, Carlin Williams, Grable Advertising, brand strategy. I think this is more a question for Marc. We talked a lot about internal talent, and we talked about external talent partners. And I'm just wondering what the biggest unmet need is from partners, like agency partners, in terms of enabling innovation.
You talk mostly agency partners, you mean?
Well, the partners that I feel are important for innovation, but of course that's my area is agencies, but as a marketer speaking to the room, other partners as well, your biggest unmet needs.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the ability for us to not be caught in our traditional models. And unfortunately, there are two different kind of talents. There is the people who have acquired, who fill a box, and the people who have acquired an innate skill to throw at any problem and try to come up with an innovative solution. And unfortunately, whether it's inside the corporate world or in a lot of the agencies, we have lots of people who obey by the definition of their job, as opposed to people who have the skills of, taking any kind of problem and, cracking it in an innovative way, in a creative way, like no one else would do. And I think that that's why to be honest, we go to startups, because that's what they do. They don't have a model, a pre-established model, and they start from a blank sheet of paper and approach things from left field. And the more we can cultivate that where we don't have it, so if we don't have it internally in some of our agency partners, the challenge is very often the outside world mimics the internal world. We've created, account management muscle to muscle one another. So.
Yes.
Craig Brennan, Quick Mobile. It seems like in today's world, especially with mobile, digital, it's the speed of contextualization. How fast can you recontextualize your competitive environment, your set, whatever it is, to be able to drive insight to come up with something creative or innovative? So I'm just wondering, across the three companies, what do you guys do to help your employees recontextualize on a faster basis?
So, that's where I really am very keen on data, is the ability to actually, through data science, contextualize and personalize in real time the way you engage with people. And so we're really on this developing a whole internal program to push the ability of our marketers to deal with that. And to think very differently to the way we connect with people in a real time, but using data to be able to understand what's the specific context of the people, of the consumers, using the data we know, but also ambient data, and being able, therefore, to disrupt a little bit linear thinking. One example I always like to take is, so we have Ben & Jerry's as one of our brands. Traditionally, when you think ice cream, you think warm weather, where the reality is there is a peak of sale of ice cream of Ben & Jerry pints, especially when there's going to be a rainy weekend, because you're going to watch movies and you're going to want to have comfortable. So understanding that specific context, which comes from combining what we know about people, but also what we know about the weather, the forecast, the time of the week, to actually bring a specific message to people that's relevant to that insight is absolutely critical.
We changed the cultural anchors of our company at GE. Again, how do we bring a small company mindset and a large company body is the quest, right? So what we did was over the last couple of years, we said, this is not just a journey for the marketeers, it's for the whole organization. And we need to change the frame of thinking for all our employees. So we did a lot of work, and among other things, we said there are new set of cultural anchors. And these may not sound profound, but they were very relevant in the change context we were driving. For instance, customers determine our success. That's one anchor. Second, stay lean. Third anchor, Learn and adapt to win, which is the most important one. Fourth, empower and inspire each other, work more horizontally. And fifth, deliver results in an uncertain world. So we said these are the new anchors that allows you to now take the liberty of pivoting to be a responsive, experimentative, learning company as you go forward. So that is something we're being driven across the organization. We expect managers and employees to act that way, and we have created the environment for people to do so.
So if we just talked a lot about culture and how you create that culture, and that's largely what it was that you were both referring to. And if I could just maybe pull that onion one layer deeper, and I would say that then it's experience. So you can't just overnight, especially in a firm the size of GE, expect that you're going to be able to change the culture in a meaningful way in a matter of days or weeks, right? These are things that probably took you a long time and was a long and was a long sort of journey to be able to do that. And I think, certainly what I've seen in doing this and managing large organizations, when you're trying to make a big culture shift, oftentimes you try to swing the pendulum really far in one direction, knowing that you're going to end up somewhere in the middle. And then it's just through experience. So you might not be so great at experimenting the first few times, and you might have your metrics wrong in the beginning, and you might mismeasure, and you might not take the temperature frequently enough. But then you learn from that. And as long as you remain open-minded that you're going to continue to learn and you build experience, that gets built into the muscle memory of the organization, and then it can start to scale much more effectively.